There is no word for someone who truly follows God. There is no word. A follower of God doesn't cover it. A Christian doesn't cover it, because a Christian has come to be defined by the church and the Bible. And Jesus never said, read the Bible alone. He said, seek ye the kingdom of heaven, which is going to force you to read the Bible thoroughly and do your due diligence. You're going to come across Joseph. You're not going to fixate on the coat, like we see in mainstream churchianity, or whatever you want to call it, the technicolor coat. See, liberals might think about the rainbow, how it relates to the color of the coat. And presentation bitches on the right would fixate on the coat itself. Why not who he married and why? Because this would lead you to the true meaning of the grace of God, which is a light temple, spirit warrior, quote unquote, martial arts grace that has one Pharaoh. And the true definition of that, if you're going to go that far in the first place, is going to lead you to a black African martial arts order and how they bred with other races. So these people are jealous of the black African martial artists being more in the spirit and more in grace. And they're also angry at the fact that they used to breed with attractive women from other races. When you look at Cersei, what characteristics does she have? She's short, stubby, and ugly as a black woman. Okay, so, where does she fit into all this? The most handsome and ideal black men of her society were breeding with other races, and they were doing things in a way that reflected the masculine traits of God, the true traits of God, which are most embodied in a martial artist coordinating and harmonizing his mind, body, soul. Harmony and harmonizing mind, body, soul with nature. Senses, right? Versus being sensual. When you think about it, Luciferian energy is just that. It is energy. It is at odds with the spirit, the true spirit. And the Luciferian energy comes as a result of psychology almost every single time, pretty much. And or just jealousy, right? But basically in this psychological construct that they've been building for generations, it is a result of psychology. The Luciferian doctrine is the rejection of the martial arts structure. It is the cultivation of jealous and frustrated sexual energies, nervous energies as they relate to sex, being on the spot with women watching, and to channel those energies into something destructive under the guise of being constructive. When you think about a drunk person staggering, right, is he not in a Luciferian spirit? He could very well be. He could very well be drunk, horny, and out of touch. In fact, I would argue that alcohol is very conducive to the Luciferian spirit in many cases, including sex. Okay? So, and of course, you see this, drinking wine, eating cheese, the sophisticated Frenchman, the price of the more expensive wines, the aged wines, and champagne. Okay? Jesus himself is said to die in his 30s in popular culture. I would argue that the ideal leader is in his 30s. The ideal revelations that one comes to occur in your 30s and not in old age. So, can you one-up the sun? No, you can't. The idea of transforming, it takes the proper logos to transform people. The greatest instructor is not somebody from the Buddhist temple or some yin-yang temple or some, Freemason pretending to teach, Egyptian martial arts. It is actually the person who spars the best in the spirit of God, no Luciferian energy. He pours that spirit into mankind on the proper lampstand, on top of the pyramid, and people transform and grow their wings. Your wings are clipped because you're not in the Logos. You don't go to heaven because you're not in the Logos. You've trained your whole life to live in psychology and the Luciferian spirit. If you think about what a mantra is, it is very similar to prayers. You go to church, you pray. These people support the state. Quite often they have American flags there. This is a psychological state, the American dream. I went over that in the other video. So basically you have a mantra that is induced by psychology. And when you consider about the Roman Empire and paganism, it has a lot to do with psychology and saying stupid little sayings, which are called prayers, which is really praying on the congregation and not really being in the spirit. That's why it's called to pray. All right, so as we go on, You're in a complex psychological construct or system. You're either an initiate in a secret society, which is the lowest of the spiritual pyramid, the lowest of the low. The more you're in the know and contributing to the Luciferian spirit, the more you're a spiritual bottom feeder on the bottom of the spiritual pyramid. You have no hope in the afterlife at all. That's why Queen sings that one song. They're called Queen, right? There's no hope for us. It's all decided for us. Who wants to live forever, and so on, right? This is Luciferian spirit. They're presenting, they're acting, all right? So the self-initiate is basically somebody who takes it upon themselves to find their own path within the Luciferian construct, and they're allowed to live because they're doing things in a way that's compatible with the pedophile state. So obviously when you have pedophiles in the church, sexual immorality, you have racist churches, all these problems in the church, all this denial, all this cover-up, they're paying money to cover it up, capitalism mentality, the Pope approves of homosexuality. By the time you factor everything in, you know that, hey, there's something wrong here. I'm an idiot if I trust any pastor or preacher. I need to look for myself and remove all selfishness, because it is selfishness that's causing them to lead people astray. Okay, it goes without saying. It's going to lead you to Egypt eventually, one way or another, especially if you read the scriptures and start from Genesis. By the time you get to 40, 41, etc., you're going to find that Joseph married the priestess of On, all the tribes of Israel, their progenitors all fell short of glory, but Joseph, and he brought them to Egypt. He brought them to that perspective and taught them from that perspective after he himself had learned from Egypt to a certain degree. Okay, regardless how you slice it. So, and he himself was not made the Pharaoh, but he was put beneath the Pharaoh, and he accepted that place. And the Pharaoh is from a long tradition of martial arts. Joseph was not. So yes, the Bible does scream that there's a martial arts order, which was really a pure white light temple order, and that you're an idiot if you don't see it that way, and that you have no right to address God if you're not in the proper logos. You are basically in a state of sorcery. You're too ignorant, and you're complicit with a pedophile, murderous state, and you're addressing God. That is like serial killers addressing me, dressed up as martial artists, and saying we are equal to the top martial artists. Please bless us. Of course, the answer is no, and it's hard not to, chastise them, rebuke them, and punish them extra for that. I'd go as far as to say that must occur as well. So when we look at the sun, the natural coordination of dust clouds or dust particles or whatever makes up the sun. Okay, so you can't say I'm big and strong, I'm presentation bitch. You have to be able to actually apply these things naturally, not just put on a show. Imagine if the sun was just about putting on a show, and presentation, and it didn't apply the force, the spirit, and to marshal the planets. We'd all be doomed. So obviously to follow a sun that doesn't apply the spirit in sparring, to spar it, the spirit, okay, spar it. Of course, it would be a great mistake. Of course, it's a great mistake to think that, all is well, we screened out the natural order, and that there is a logos. After I'm dead, there is no more of God's logos. There's just a psychological construct and mind control. Mind control is also a deal breaker. You cannot be a Christian in a mind control society where they single you out for extreme mind control. You're eventually going to go astray. If no one's listening to you because they're all in denial and a state of cognitive dissonance, if you will, and it's a mind control state, of course there's no chance for you to be a Christian and to do the work of God. You must find a way to die, and preferably it is addressing the state from this perspective I have spelled out to you. And if you need me to spell it out more, I don't know what to tell you. All right. The concrete versus the grass, right? Which one is more in the spirit of God, the concrete or the grass? What about the grass or the hawk? If you need me to spell that out for you, you're already lost. For me to have to spell these things out to society means they're lost. The fact that nobody, not a single person, came into the Logos and stood behind me, stood with me, conceding that I'm the closest to God, shows you that man is lost. Right? There is a degree of the Spirit will guide you, to the shepherd, if you will. And the shepherd actually is a false word used to describe to a bunch of people that listen to Pan and Bacchus and are lost because they're in the spirit of reveling, and drinking and having satanic sex and pedophilia, what have you. So there's something that is compatible with psychology versus being awake. conscious, perceptive, observative, and so on. And of course, you need to be selfless to achieve this state. And of course, when someone is actually the top spirit warrior, the top quote-unquote martial artist, it is easier for him to tell you the truth, because what ulterior motive do I have, which also demands that there's one person on top. Because now, with no one competing for me from my truthful perspective, there's no reason for me to lie. Versus I'm a psychological construct bitch who's been elevated by construct bitches who has every reason to lie. So the mind control intrusions. Okay, moving on. So to get you to their perspective, they're going to use attractive women, political groups, peer pressure, social pressure, psychology, which is the most common form of mind control. Mind control basically is applied psychology with technology and drugs. Political and financial pressures and incentives. Okay. So there's the natural calling versus false pride and the accompanying psychology. America is basically a place where we reject the natural spirit leaders of God under the guise of the idea that they make us look bad, right? Because they're black and we're not. This is the general attitude in America. And the black people who aren't martial artists, so there's something similar, kind of Cersei bitch made perspective going on. And at the same time, we say that black people are the ugliest people, and black people themselves see it that way for the most part. A lot of them who do see it that way are in a state of false pride where they deny that which helps these people to justify to themselves what they're doing. So yes, black people prefer Puerto Ricans, whites, Hispanics, and so on. And they end up, trying to have this false pride and blinding themselves to that. For the same reason people, when reaching out to God, have this kind of psychology-based false pride that causes them to go to basically people who are they're more accurately described as psychologists than preachers or so on, unless you consider that being a preacher is a psychologist. The same thing with martial arts that we have. They're more accurately described as psychologists than actual martial artists. They hid from my challenge. They didn't have the spirit to find me, to compete with me. No matter how you slice it, they didn't do what I've done, is uncontrolled, blah, blah, blah. There's no way around that I'm the top martial artist, which is really the top light temple, pure white, pure sunlight, masculine spirit energy of God. So a lot of these people have corporate fetishes, the hero, con, whore, fetish, problem, solution, make the good guy into the bad guy, make the lukewarm guy into the bad guy, put on your, be the hero cop, be the hero citizen, the vigilant citizen, and so on. The Greek gods prove my point. God is love, not psychology and based attraction. You have to understand the difference between energy, the atmosphere of Luciferian energy, and the atmosphere of the Spirit of God, which is now gone forever. If a man is sober, awake, and aware, his natural state is extreme resentment and a desire to stop them by any means, honing his senses, not selling out for his sensual and carnal desires, right? Think about how psychopathy, empathy, compassion, passion, pass I on. Okay, you can become a psychopath out of empathy and compassion, or you can come into the Spirit of God and do what is completely consistent with the Logos. And in my absence, one must die in a state of reaching out for the Logos. And I'm not going to say to reach out for me, but to reach out in the Spirit that I've given you, to reach out for God, to God. I am the Son of God, because everyone else is a child of the devil.